The crystal throne room of Zithra blazed with 1,000 suns as Princess Ashera surveyed the assembled rulers. Crimson banners rippled beneath the domed ceiling, each bearing the crest of a different galactic empire. King Vextar of the Crimson Nebula stood 7 feet tall, his obsidian armor gleaming with conquered worlds. Emperor Drathzul commanded fleets that could level planets. Prince Kael'mon brought treasures that would buy entire star systems. And then there was Jake Morrison. He hadn't meant to be here. The human mechanic had been hired to repair the princess's damaged scout ship 3 months ago on a remote trading station. While other mechanics refused the job, working on Zytherian technology was considered above human capability. Jake had simply rolled up his sleeves and gotten to work. He'd spent 2 weeks covered in iridescent fuel, decoding alien engineering through trial and error, refusing to give up even when the ship's AI mocked his primitive methods. When he'd finally powered up the engines, Princess Ashera had been standing in the doorway of the repair bay, watching him with eyes like molten gold. She'd removed her hood, revealing crystalline skin that seemed to hold entire galaxies within it, and smiled at him, really smiled, for the first time in years. "You didn't quit," she'd said simply. "Machine's not fixed until it's fixed," Jake had replied, wiping his hands on a rag. "Your Highness." Now, standing in the throne room in borrowed formal clothes that didn't quite fit, Jake felt profoundly out of place. He'd only come because Ashera had personally invited him, and refusing a royal summons seemed like a bad idea. He watched as king after king approached the throne, offering elaborate speeches about dynasties and power. King Vextar's voice boomed across the chamber, "Princess Ashera, unite with me, and our empires shall rule from the core worlds to the outer rim. I offer you 1,000 conquered planets as my wedding gift." Ashera's expression remained neutral, her fingers drumming against the armrest of her throne. The assembled crowd murmured with anticipation. This was the moment they'd all been waiting for, the moment she would choose which empire to align with, which king would gain access to Zithra's advanced technology and strategic position at the galaxy's heart. She rose from her throne, her gown flowing like liquid starlight. The room fell silent. "I thank each of you for your generous offers." Ashera's voice carried the harmonics unique to her species, a sound that could shatter glass or soothe storms. "But I have already made my choice." She descended the steps, walking past the assembled kings. Past Vextar with his armies. Past Drathzul with his fleets. Past Kael'mon with his treasures. She stopped in front of Jake Morrison, who stood frozen in shock. "This human," she announced, extending her hand to him. "I choose him." The throne room erupted in chaos. Jake's quarters in the royal palace were larger than his entire apartment back on Earth. He paced across floors that seemed carved from frozen nebula, his mind racing. Outside the towering windows, 3 moons hung in the purple sky, casting strange shadows that moved against the light. The door chimed with a melodic tone. Before he could respond, Ashera entered, having bypassed his locks with royal override. She'd changed from her ceremonial gown into something simpler, though on her, even simple clothing seemed to capture and refract light in impossible ways. "You've been avoiding me since the ceremony," she said, her voice softer now, without the formal harmonics. "It's been 3 hours. 3 hours since you upended galactic politics and made me the most hated human in the universe," Jake replied, running his hand through his hair. "Ashera, what were you thinking? I'm a mechanic from Detroit. Those kings out there command armies that could atomize Earth before breakfast." She moved closer, her alien features somehow both foreign and captivating. Up close, he could see the subtle patterns in her crystalline skin, like fingerprints made of constellations. "Do you know what I saw when you repaired my ship? A stubborn idiot who doesn't know when to quit. I saw someone who treats machines with respect. Who solves problems instead of throwing power at them." She reached out, her fingers brushing his arm. Her touch sent warmth through him, actual warmth, like she generated her own heat. Every king in that room sees the universe as something to conquer. You see it as something to understand. Jake felt his breath catch as she moved closer still. "There's more to this, isn't there? Some political angle I'm not seeing?" "Yes," she admitted. But not the kind you think. She took his hand, pressing it against her chest. Her heart, or whatever the Cytherian equivalent was, pulsed with a rhythm that seemed to synchronize with his own. My species is dying, Jake. Not from war or disease, but from genetic stagnation. For 1,000 years, we've only married within our empire, with other powerful species. We've become so specialized, so refined, that we're losing the ability to adapt. And humans? Your species is chaos incarnate. You've only been spacefaring for 50 years, yet you've already found ways to survive in environments that would kill most races. Your genetic diversity is extraordinary. Your ability to adapt is unmatched. Her golden eyes searched his face. When I touched you that day in the repair bay, my medical implant detected something. Your DNA carries markers that could revitalize my entire species. So this is about breeding? Jake pulled back slightly, hurt flickering across his face. It started that way, Ashera said quietly. 3 months ago, yes. But then I got to know you. I watched you work. I heard you sing to yourself when you thought no one was listening. I saw you share your rations with a starving refugee child at the station. She cupped his face in her hands, her touch gentle despite her obvious physical strength. I chose you because somewhere between pragmatism and prophecy, I fell in love with you. The assassination attempt came at midnight. Jake woke to the sound of his window shattering, rolling out of bed as plasma fire seared through the space where his head had been. Years of growing up in Detroit's rougher neighborhoods kicked in, instinct over panic. He grabbed the heavy crystal lamp from the nightstand and hurled it at the figure climbing through the window. The assassin dodged easily, raising a weapon that hummed with deadly energy. But before they could fire, Ashera burst through the door, moving with a speed that defied physics. Her hand, which Jake suddenly realized could shift into something blade-like, caught the assassin across the throat. The intruder collapsed, their cloaking device failing. Emperor Drathzel's insignia glowed on their armor. Not dead, Ashera said, her voice cold. I want answers. She'd pressed some kind of nerve cluster Jake didn't know humans had, and the assassin gasped, paralyzed but conscious. Royal guards flooded the room within seconds. As they dragged the would-be killer away, Ashara's father, King Theron, arrived with his advisors. The king was even more imposing than his daughter, ancient, powerful, and currently looking at Jake with an expression that mixed concern with calculation. The third attempt this week, Theron said heavily. The rejected kings are getting bold. We should confine the human to the inner sanctum, suggested High Chancellor Miravel, a reed-thin advisor whose species communicated partially through color-changing skin, currently displaying worried purples and reds. No, Ashera said firmly, moving to stand beside Jake. Her hand found his, their fingers intertwining. I won't hide him away like some guilty secret. Theron studied their joined hands, then sighed. Daughter, I understand your choice better than you know. But you must understand the threat this poses. The Galactic Council operates on a delicate balance of power. By choosing this human, you've disrupted alliances centuries old. Maybe those alliances needed disrupting, Jake found himself saying. All eyes turned to him, and he felt his heart hammering, but continued. I've been doing some reading in your archives. Your balance of power looks a lot like stagnation. The same families, the same species, the same empires trading control back and forth while smaller civilizations get crushed underfoot. The human speaks with unexpected wisdom, Miravel's skin flickered to surprised orange. Though wisdom may not be enough against plasma cannons. Later, when the room had cleared and extra guards were posted, Ashera led Jake to a private balcony overlooking the capital city. Millions of lights sparkled below, representing hundreds of species living together under Cytherian protection. My father knows about the prophecy, she said quietly. About what our union could mean. There's a prophecy? Jake leaned against the railing. Of course there's a prophecy. Why wouldn't there be a prophecy? Ashera smiled slightly, then grew serious. An ancient text, written when my species first achieved spaceflight. It speaks of a union between starborn and groundborn that will either unite the galaxy or destroy it. No pressure, then. She turned to him, pressing close. Jake, I need you to understand something. If we go through with this marriage, you won't just be my husband. The genetic compatibility means our children would be something entirely new, a bridge between species. And that scares the kings. It terrifies them. She kissed him then, soft and urgent, her crystalline skin warm against his. Because it means the end of their exclusive power. If humans and Cytherians can unite, what's to stop any species from forming bonds? The old hierarchies would crumble. Jake pulled back enough to look into her golden eyes. Is that why you're really doing this? Revolution disguised as romance? I'm doing this, Ashera said, her hands sliding under his shirt, tracing the muscles of his back, because when I'm with you, I feel more alive than I have in my entire existence. Everything else is just a convenient bonus. The Galactic Council convened on the neutral world of Axis Prime, a construct at the exact center of the galaxy where all species supposedly stood equal. The amphitheater could hold 10,000 delegates, and today every seat was filled. Jake stood in the defendant's circle, Ashera beside him, as King Vexstar himself presented the prosecution. The human Jake Morrison, Vexstar's voice boomed through translation devices, stands accused of using prohibited genetic engineering to seduce Princess Ashera. We demand his immediate deportation to human space and the annulment of any proposed union. That's a lie, Jake said clearly. The amphitheater fell silent. Humans rarely spoke in council, their species had observer status at best. I never touched genetic engineering. I fixed a ship. That's it. Yet you claim the princess chose you over the most powerful rulers in the galaxy? Vexstar sneered. What else but artificial enhancement could explain such an absurd choice? Perhaps, a new voice rang out, she chose someone who sees her as a person rather than a political asset. Jake turned to see a human woman entering the chamber, Ambassador Elena Wright, Earth's senior representative. She was in her 60s, sharp-eyed, and walked with the confidence of someone who'd spent decades refusing to be intimidated by beings who could crush planets. Ambassador Wright, the council chairman acknowledged. You are not scheduled to speak. I invoke Article 7, Wright said calmly. A human stands accused. Earth has the right to defense. What followed was 3 hours of political theater that Jake barely followed. Genetic reports were presented and disputed. Ancient treaties were cited. At one point, 2 delegates nearly came to blows over precedent from a case 400 years old. Finally, Chancellor Mirabel rose to speak. The changeable advisor's skin displayed diplomatic neutrals, soft greens and blues. Perhaps we are asking the wrong question. The issue is not whether Mr. Morrison is worthy. The question is whether Princess Ashera has the sovereign right to choose her own consort. Cytherian law is clear, Ashera's father, King Theron, stood. My daughter may marry whom she chooses. However, I acknowledge the Council's concern about genetic implications. Therefore, I propose a compromise. Jake felt Ashera stiffen beside him. A trial period, Theron continued. 1 year. Jake Morrison will undergo training in galactic politics, combat, and diplomacy. He will serve as Ashera's official consort, but the marriage will not be finalized until he proves capable of the role. And if he fails? Vexstar demanded. Then Ashera chooses again. Theron's gaze was steady. But if he succeeds, all objections are withdrawn. Permanently. The vote was close, but it passed. Jake had 1 year to transform from a Detroit mechanic into someone who could stand beside an alien princess without getting them both killed. That night, in Ashera's chambers, she held him close, her body pressed against his in the darkness. I'm sorry, she whispered. I never meant to put you through this. Hey, Jake tilted her chin up, kissing her softly. I've survived worse. Besides, how hard can princess school be? They both knew the answer, impossibly, perhaps fatally, hard. But as Ashera's hands explored his body, as their breathing synchronized and their hearts beat as one, Jake found he didn't care. Some things were worth fighting for. And some people were worth risking everything. The year transformed Jake in ways he never imagined. He learned to fight in zero gravity against opponents with 4 arms. He memorized the diplomatic protocols of 300 species. He survived assassination attempts, poison, and a particularly memorable incident involving Ambassador's carnivorous pet that still gave him nightmares. But more than that, he learned what it meant to truly know someone from another world. Ashera showed him her people's bioluminescent festivals, where Cytherians gathered in darkness and let their bodies glow with shared emotion, creating living constellations. Jake taught her Earth blues, playing harmonica on a balcony while she laughed at his terrible singing voice. They spent nights mapping the differences and similarities between their species, not just biological, but philosophical, emotional, spiritual. "Your species believes in soul mates," Ashera said one evening, lying in his arms, her crystalline skin reflecting the light of her homeworld's moons. "The idea that one person is destined for another." "Some of us do," Jake agreed, his fingers tracing patterns on her shoulder. "Do Cytherians?" "We believe in choice," she said. "That love is not found but built. Yet with you." She turned to face him, her golden eyes reflecting his image. "With you, I feel both. Like I chose you, and was always meant to." The final test came on the anniversary of the Council's decision. Jake had to demonstrate his worthiness before the assembled galaxy, not through combat or politics, but through a Cytherian ritual called the bonding. It required him to link his mind directly with Ashera's, no barriers, no secrets. Every fear, every doubt, every hidden thought would be laid bare. It was how Cytherians confirmed true compatibility, and many relationships had shattered under its absolute honesty. Jake knelt before Ashera in the crystal throne room, the same place where she'd chosen him a year ago. This time, the assembled kings watched in silence, waiting for him to fail. Ashera placed her hands on either side of his face, and the world went white. He felt her, not just her thoughts, but her essence. The loneliness of growing up royal, never knowing if people loved her or her crown. The weight of duty. The desperate hope that somewhere in the infinite galaxy, someone could see past the princess to the person underneath. And she felt him, the abandoned kid from Detroit who learned to fix things because nothing in his life had ever stayed unbroken. The fear that he wasn't enough, would never be enough. The stubborn refusal to quit even when quitting made sense. But beneath all of it, a truth neither could deny: they fit. 2 puzzle pieces from different sets that somehow clicked together perfectly. When they opened their eyes, Ashera was crying, something Cytherians rarely did. King Vextar himself stood and bowed, a gesture of acceptance that rippled through the chamber. "I guess I passed," Jake whispered. "You did more than pass," Ashera pulled him to his feet. "You helped me become whole." The wedding was held under the light of a supernova, with representatives from every corner of the galaxy. And when the human mechanic kissed his alien princess, when their different biologies and impossibly compatible hearts beat as one, something shifted in the galaxy. Perhaps it was the prophecy fulfilling itself. Perhaps it was simply 2 people proving that love transcends any boundary. Either way, the universe would never be the same. The end.